Smith Show starts right now.
What's going on? Dan Graca sitting in for the man, Stephen on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. You know our phone number, it's 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Graca, Graca. We've gotten through the whole 4th of July holiday. It's come and gone. Unfortunately, the news we were waiting for, we still haven't gotten any clarity on it. And that's, of course, Kawhi Leonard, waiting for him to make up his mind as to where he's going to be playing basketball, not just next year, but maybe for the next several seasons, whether it's going to be rejoining the world champion Raptors. Still getting used to saying that, by the way. Or going back home to Southern California, whether it's going to be in a Lakers uniform or a Los Angeles Clippers jersey. And we'll get into all of that here coming up. But just want to remind you that if you need seats to a game, download the Vivid Seats app and enter promo code CHAMPS at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Don't buy just any seat. Get yourself a Vivid seat. And with that, it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. We also got Summer League debuting tonight, of course, out there in Vegas. We're carrying it for you on ESPN, and really the hype duel is going to be the Knicks against the Pelicans, Zion against his former college teammate, R.J. Barrett. That's coming up at 9:30 Eastern Time, and as I said, you can check it out all on ESPN tonight. That's going to be one worth watching for sure. But what about Kawhi? You know, we did the show yesterday for Stephen A. and kind of threw a lot out there. So if you weren't with us, nothing really has changed in 24 hours. The bottom line is this. If you're Kawhi Leonard, you have already proven that you are indeed a difference maker. You're a franchise player. You could take a team, a nation, in the Raptors case, on your back and lead them to the promised land. So he has nothing to prove in that sense. This is a guy who's a 2-time Finals MVP already. That's rarefied air. He's clearly one of the top players in the NBA. 2, 3, you can order them however which way you want. And there's different ramifications, of course, for all of these teams, depending on what his choice is going to be. Now, in a perfect world, you could say, well, if you have a matter of preference, where do you want to see Kawhi end up if you don't have a dog in the fight? For me, I would probably like to see him go back to Toronto, finish what he started. And what I mean by that is, all right, you won one championship, why not win another? Right? Prove that this just wasn't a fluke. Prove to all the naysayers out there and all the doubters who want to put an asterisk on this championship, and I'm not one of them, by the way, but at least go out there and show this is legitimate. We can still win, even if the opponent is healthy, and that we maybe didn't catch a little bit of a break because Golden State lost, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and whoever along the way. Prove that you're the best team in the Eastern Conference, that you're better than Giannis and the Bucks, and that even though Philadelphia's got all this star power, that you could still go out there and match them stride for stride and then take it all the way back to the finals again. Right? That's what you have at stake here if you're Kawhi. Build a dynasty with the Toronto Raptors. Kawhi has garnered this label as a dynasty killer, and how can you blame him, right? Because when he was with San Antonio, he killed LeBron James in the Heat dynasty. And now here with this championship with the Toronto Raptors, he went ahead and just slaughtered what was left of that Golden State Warriors group. Now build upon this. I'm a little bit old school. I'm tired of these guys jumping from team to team to team. How about staying in one place for a little bit? I know a lot of these guys do it because they want to win and they want to maybe give themselves the best chance to be successful and to get a championship. But if you're Kawhi Leonard and you're going to leave the Raptors, I have a hard time believing that leaving the defending NBA champion is necessarily the best thing for your basketball career, because how is that the case? If you're a competitor, if you want to go out there and prove that you are the best, the team that you play on is the best, then stay right where you are. What are you going to go join a Lakers team for? Why? Because they have LeBron James and they have Anthony Davis and an up-and-coming Kyle Kuzma? But it's the Lakers. I get it. And it's home. Same thing with the Clippers. I mean, the Clippers have some nice pieces. The Beverleys, the Lou Williams, the Landry Shamet's, Montrezl Harrell, Gilgeous-Alexander, guys like that. The Clippers are maybe a nice little story that need a leader, somebody to pull them all together. Maybe he thinks he can be that player. Fine. That's fine. But if I had my druthers stay in Toronto. See, we have a lot of great players in the NBA, a lot of talented guys, a lot of talented players. I'm not a fan of the super teams. I'm not a fan of these big threes. I want to be able to spread as much talent across this great game as possible. So if I'm sitting at home on a Wednesday night in January and I turn on the TV and the Toronto Raptors are playing, I want to know that not only am I watching the defending champs, I'm also checking out Kawhi Leonard, one of the best players in the NBA, and his supporting cast, which is supposed to make another run at an NBA championship. I don't want to just have to put on a game where you have 2 or 3 or 4 teams that pack all this star power in it, and then everybody else is just kind of picking up the pieces after that. That's not what sports is supposed to be. That's not what competition is supposed to be. You ask me, a super team, more than anything else, is basically something that's created. So if you're not a fan of that team, that's who you root against. They become the evil empire. So if Kawhi decides to go to the Lakers, guess what? They become the ones with the target on their backs. That's what happens here. Much like to a lot of folks, the Golden State Warriors were for the last few seasons when Kevin Durant decided to leave the Thunder and go play with them. That was already a championship caliber team, and then they got even stronger. So when they do finally fall, and when it does come crumbling down, kind of like it did this past June, you take a little bit of satisfaction in that. You don't want to see anybody get hurt. You don't want to see any serious injury. But the team that was brought together, that was supposed to destroy the rest of the sport, that was supposed to win big, when you see them fail, you like it. Because then you say, you know what? Maybe this formula doesn't always work. And it's been proven. It's not just in the case of the Golden State Warriors. I mean, when LeBron went down to Miami, and that really kind of kick-started this whole second phase of the super team in the NBA, right? They talked a big game. They talked about not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4 championships. And then they went to the finals the first year, and Dirk Nowitzki and the Mavericks beat them. How satisfying was that? Everybody not a Miami Heat fan, how satisfying was it to watch Dirk Nowitzki and Sean Marion and Tyson Chandler and Jason Terry and Jason Kidd and all those guys dethrone the Heat? That was fantastic. Couldn't have made me happier, because it showed, you know what? That taking the easy way is not always the safest way and the best way. It could be done. And then when that Heat group kind of ran out of gas a little bit because of Kawhi and his San Antonio Spurs team, you said, all right, that's fine. So I do think that in a weird way that there are rooms for these teams in sports, because you need a villain. You need a bad guy. Just like in anything else, whether it's a movie, whether it's a television show, you need the villain. Right? It adds some spice. It adds some juiciness to what we love to do, and that is watch sports and competition. Doesn't mean it always works out, but I think that there's a place for it. And right now, it looks like the Lakers are going to be that leading contender to kind of fill that role a little bit. Nobody looks at the Toronto Raptors as the villain, right? You can't. Because I don't see a lot of players flocking to Toronto and say, oh, I got to go and play there. Philadelphia, for the most part, the core of that basketball team, and I'm talking about Embiid and I'm talking about Ben Simmons, first of all, they haven't won anything yet. So I don't think that they're anywhere close to garnering that distinction. But those were guys who were homegrown. They were drafted. I know Tobias Harris was a guy that they traded for and that they signed. Al Horford joined from abroad, but it doesn't matter. That's Simmons and that's Embiid, that basketball team. The Bucks, they got Giannis. Oh, okay, but they had a great regular season, didn't win anything. It's all about the Lakers here. They're the ones that are going to be looked upon as being the villain if they get Kawhi Leonard. And what is this going to do for LeBron James? I mean, let's think about it for a second. Let's say Kawhi goes there. Really, for the third time in his career, he's going to have a big 3 that he's going to be able to go to battle with. He's going to have Anthony Davis, who's a phenomenal player. Hasn't won anything, but he's a phenomenal player. Okay, and then you're going to join Kawhi Leonard. On paper, that could be as good a trio as we've seen in quite some time in this sport. I mean, good luck trying to score against that team if they stay healthy. I mean, it would be downright scary. But the problem that the league would also get is a little bit of what happened to them last year, is that if you have all this appeal and the most attractive team in the league playing out on the West Coast, during the regular season, you're going to have some problems getting eyeballs to the sets. Because that then the Lakers are going to be on prime time, they're going to be on national TV, they're going to get a bunch of ESPN assignments and whatnot. And a lot of people outside of the West Coast, they're going to have a hard time staying up late watching these games. I mean, it's a fact. It's been well documented that the ratings were down a little bit last year, and for good reason. You had LeBron out on the West Coast. His games weren't seen by as many people as they normally are. But now, if you get this group and they come together, I mean, the Lakers are going to be the #1 box office draw, and then some. So for that sake, I hope it doesn't happen. I really and truly hope he doesn't go to LA. Stay put in Toronto. I could stomach the Clippers. Okay, I can deal with that. At least you're spreading the talent pool out a little bit more across the NBA. You know, the Clippers just need somebody to bring this whole thing together and send them on their way. And I wouldn't discount them. They got a real shot at this thing. They got a guy who's a Hall of Famer in that front office. The guy who's the logo, and I'm talking about Jerry West, who in the past has done a phenomenal job securing talent as an executive. And don't think that that doesn't hold some credibility when you're talking about a Kawhi Leonard. All right, if Kawhi Leonard wanted to sit down and talk to Magic Johnson about what life would be like as a Los Angeles Laker, you mean to tell me that he's not going to sit there and hear out Jerry West about what playing for the Los Angeles Clippers would do? And it sounds kind of odd to say because Jerry West, of course, is a legendary LA Laker, right? Player, executive, whatever, and now he's moved on to the Clippers. But if he's willing to hear from Magic Johnson, who was an embarrassment as an executive, right? The Clippers, I think, are a real player here. And really the only intrigue now becomes, when do we get our decision? It would be great if it happens in the next couple of hours. I'm not going to lie to you, because then we get some news to react to. But in the meantime, we sit, we watch, we wait as to where Kawhi is going to continue his basketball career. And from all the indications that we're getting, you know, multi-year max deals are really the only thing he's interested in. You know, the 2-year deal, the 1-and-1, that's not really been on the table much. So even if you were thinking, let's re-sign in Toronto, go 1-and-1, and then we're still going to be in the prime of our careers, and then we can revisit this whole sweepstakes again, that doesn't really seem like it's feasible to him. And you can't blame him. However, if you do the 1-and-1 thing, you do keep your options open a little bit more. However, if you sign that max deal, you got yourself your security. Because what would happen, too, is if he signs the 1-and-1, or maybe he only goes back to, or not even just to Toronto, but goes anywhere for a shorter-term deal, then he becomes a 10-year player when he's available again. And then he's going to be able to cash in a major way and get some major money. The most lucrative max contract that you possibly could entertain. But it's not like Kawhi's hurting for money. I'm sure he does very well. He's made already some good money in this league. He's got a great deal going with New Balance. You know that he's not hurting for bucks. But there are some teams hurting for a little bit of help on the basketball floor. You know, if he goes to the Lakers, they are hands down the team to beat. Doesn't mean it's going to happen that way. But they are the odds-on favorite. If he goes back to Toronto, you still have some competition in the East. You know, Philadelphia is very good. Milwaukee's very good. But is it a slam dunk that the Raptors are just going to be presumed to be the championship favorites once again? Probably. Probably, if they stay healthy and return that same group out on the floor for much of the season. I think that you have to give it to them just for the benefit of the doubt's sake, because they are the champions. But I'm not a super team guy. So I hope it's not the Lakers. We just got done with one with Golden State, right? That ship has sailed finally, thankfully. You don't want to see anybody hurt. Okay, I wish Klay Thompson was playing next year. Wish Kevin Durant was playing next year, whether it was in Golden State and ended up in Brooklyn, wherever. But I want to see those guys out on the floor. The league wants to see those guys out on the floor. The league is better when those guys are in uniform and they're out there balling each and every night. So that hurts for the league standpoint. But you know what's at stake here with these clubs. Toronto, they can roll that group right back out on the floor and win another championship. The Lakers, it restores them back to their former glory a heck of a lot faster than it would if he doesn't go there. Because from where I'm sitting right now, let's just imagine a world where the Lakers do not get Kawhi, LeBron, Anthony Davis, Kuzma, like I said. Now you're going to have to piece this thing together, get some shooters in there, make it all work. I can't sit here and say that they're the odds-on favorites. No way. Not even maybe to come out of the Western Conference. Western Conference is deep. They've got some players this year. You know, I love what the Utah Jazz did, for example. here in the offseason thus far in beefing up that roster. The Denver Nuggets are a team that had a great season last year. Maybe the experience that they accrued a year ago is only going to benefit them moving forward. The Houston Rockets probably look at this as a huge opportunity for them if they can put all their squabbles to the side between Chris Paul, James Harden, and you name it. And not to say that they're on the championship caliber level just yet, but what about the New Orleans Pelicans and the job that David Griffin has done, kind of picking up the pieces from Anthony Davis wanting to get the heck out of Dodge? I think they've done a phenomenal job. So you've got some teams now that are willing to run to the front of the line and say, well, what about us? Why can't we have a shot? Did anybody see the Toronto Raptors winning a championship at this time last year? Even when you knew that, all right, they're going to have Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi was a mystery, right? Kawhi, we didn't know what to expect from him. We barely saw him on the floor last year. We didn't know what his mindset was. We didn't know how much he was going to embrace Toronto. He might have just went out there and said, all right, I'll run up and down the floor, work up a sweat, play some games, make sure I don't do anything serious in terms of damaging my long-term health, and then I'm going to go sign back home in Southern California when the year's over. It couldn't have worked out any better. I don't know if you asked him deep down if he thought they were going to win an NBA championship last season. I don't know if he bargained for that. But it did. And that's why if you're a Raptor fan, again, I know we keep saying this, but you can't be angry at Kawhi if he decides to leave town because he gave you the ultimate. He gave you something that you never even came close to experiencing before. Remember, the hockey team can't win up there. It's been decades since the Maple Leafs ever won something significant. So the fact that the basketball team are the ones that are going to go up there and deliver a championship, I think that's great. Phenomenal. But there are so many different layers to this story and so many different things that we could still unpack by just investigating the who, the what, the where, the when, and most importantly, the why. I think that it's fair that we should even say, what does the whole Kawhi situation do for the prospect of sitting out games, load management, which became kind of like a farce in the beginning. But if you think about it now, how many games did Kawhi play last season during the regular season? About like 60, 65, whatever it was. He missed his share of games. And they all said load management. He's saving himself for the playoffs. Well, what ended up happening in the playoffs? He won an incredible run, and he led him to a championship. So you may not like it. I don't like it. But it's hard to argue with it, right? His decision was validated 100%. And so that kind of opens Pandora's box just a little bit for other players around the sport who might decide, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to sit this one out. And this was a huge problem that the NBA had a couple of years ago. A huge problem. To where the commissioner had to intervene and talk to some of these guys. And you could say that Popovich in San Antonio started the whole thing. I get it. And Kawhi came from that culture at one point. But it's not just Kawhi Leonard. There's a lot of guys. To where players were sitting out left and right because they didn't want to play maybe a back-to-back. They didn't want to go out there and, play 3 games in 4 nights. And so the league has kind of done all they could to support them by making the schedule a little bit more flexible. But now you have the ultimate example of a guy who sat out, who preserved himself for the games that matter the most, and then he had the payoff there with the championship. So you know that there are veterans all around the league who are looking at Kawhi and that run to the finals last year and saying, you know what? I think I'm going to sit this one out too. I think I'm only going to see if I can play somewhere between the 60 to 65 game range next season. I don't need to be out there every single night. So when the Houston Rockets, for example, stroll into Memphis for a Tuesday night game in the middle of February, let's say, James Harden might wake up in the morning and he could decide, I'm just not feeling it tonight. I think this is going to be a load management night. Coach, sorry, can't go tonight. I'll be in street clothes, though. I'll be sitting there cheering on the guys. It's a load management night for me. That's going to be ramped up, I think, when you look around the sport and you look at some of these guys. Didn't always used to be that way. Didn't always used to have superstars who decided to, sit out on occasion. Go look at Michael Jordan's track record. The greatest who ever did it. You think Michael Jordan had to sit games out for load management? You think Michael Jordan had to take games off? Go check out Michael Jordan on Basketball Reference. You're going to see a lot of 82, 82, 82, 82 talking about games played. And he had to shoulder the load more than any player in the sport. And it didn't stop him. And he had deep runs to the NBA Finals year after year after year, it seemed. Didn't stop him. Is it we expect less from our athletes now? Do we give our athletes a little bit too much slack? They're making more money. They do less. Does that seem right to you? Doesn't to me, but I'm kind of numb to it. I kind of expect it because we've been trending in this direction for a lot of years. You almost have to just go with the flow as far as that sense is concerned. So we wait, we watch, we wonder when Kawhi is going to make his decision. You know, there's rumors floating around out there that it's going to be today at some point, tonight, whatever. Let's hope. And then the rest of us can get on with our summers. And so could all those three teams involved in the sweepstakes. Either way, it's going to impact someone. It's going to impact the team that he gets, and it's certainly going to impact the other two teams who come up short in the sweepstakes. I want to hear from you, though, today at 888-SAY-ESPN. That's our telephone number, 888-729-3776. Once again, the Stephen A. Smith Show is brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Everything for less, only at Walmart. A lot of NBA today, as you could imagine. Summer League starting tonight in Vegas. As we told you, we're going to head out to Sin City. Coming up a little bit later on in our program, Jonathan Givony, who is our ESPN draft analyst, he is there for Summer League. He's going to check in with us coming up at 2 o'clock Eastern time. But when we roll on, we'll examine some of these scenarios a little bit closer, and we want to hear from you. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. It is a Friday here on ESPN.
Stay with the Mavs for a minute. We
Go
just
ahead.
signed Boban today.
Okay. I like Boban.
Are the Mavs going to join the EU later?
I don't know. It's quite possible between Luka Doncic, between Kristaps Porzingis, and now Boban. I mean, damn. Yeah, that is a good point. It is a good point. Appreciate the call, man. Thank you, Eric. You're live with Stephen A. What's up?
Stephen A., it's a pleasure to talk to you this morning. I just wanted to go back to what you were talking about earlier about Kawhi joining the Lakers and how you like to see him join the Clippers maybe and see the guys play against each other.
Okay.
Well, I just want to go back to remind you about a time when the Lakers put together another star-studded team, even though a couple of the stars were a little older, Shaq, Kobe, Karl Malone, and
really? That's where you going? That's where you going? Really?
No,
why would that be an analogy? Why?
Well, because don't forget that they did go to the championship, but they lost to a team.
Your fault.
So,
listen, I see what you're saying. You talk about when they lost to Detroit.
Exactly.
Listen, what I'm telling you is this. Karl Malone wasn't Karl Malone anymore, and Gary Payton certainly wasn't Gary Payton anymore.
They were a little older. You know, I know they were a little older.
They weren't in the primes of their career. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay. I got you.
You know better than that. You couldn't compare that. How the hell you going to even bring that up as a comparison with LeBron and AD 26 and Kawhi being 27?
I'm not comparing. I'm not really trying to compare. I'm just trying to say that's why they play the game. Even though you might have a super team, don't necessarily mean that you're going to win. That's why they play the game. So in other words, you held on online to get on the phone on the national airwaves to tell me that's why you play the games.
That's the best you could do?
Just to remind you, because I know you know that.
That's the best you could do. To remind me. You called up to be on hold to remind me that they still got to play the games. Wow.
That's the best I got today.
Happy 4th of July. That's not good enough for me. It's not good enough for me. You can do better than that. Have a good day, though. Enjoy the 4th of July. Don't eat too many hot dogs and burgers, but eat some.
The way he does that is if he has the utmost confidence that they're getting Kawhi back for at least a year.
Masai in Toronto can make a case. We're the reigning defending NBA champions. You have an entire nation, an entire country that is Canada at your disposal. Doesn't appear to have any bad options at all.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
For Stephen A. here on this Friday, ESPN Radio and ESPN News. 888-729-3776 is our telephone number. At Dan Graca, Graca. You can find me on Twitter. And if you missed any of my opening segment, go check it out on demand in the Stephen A. Smith podcast. It's brought to you by Eno, the Capital One assistant that catches things that might look wrong with your credit card. It sends an alert to your phone and it helps you fix them. What's in your wallet? See CapitalOne.com for details. And ESPN Radio also presented by Progressive Insurance. Cars, homes, boats, motorcycles, RVs, and more at Progressive.com. Talking NBA, talking Kawhi Watch here with you. And let's get to the phone so the people could chime in. And let us start it off with William in Illinois. William, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for taking my call.
What's up, William?
Wanted to get a quick question in here about the super teams because I had the privilege of even watching in the Bird and Magic days. It seems old school teams started the super teams. The only difference now is the method. The players decide more than just the GM. So my confusion is, it's like we want LeBron to win with a championship with Mo Williams, but we're okay with letting Jordan win with Hall of Famers, Magic win with Hall of Famers, Bird, Hall of Famers. But we want this generation to win with, like, the 6 men on the bench as starters. So I'm kind of confused with that. I know the method is different, but old school started the super teams. If you look at our greatest players, there's not too many that won without other Hall of Famers. And the people that didn't have Hall of Famers back in those days that were great, like Reggie, Barkley, they lost.
Well, you're throwing Ewing, too, with the Knicks. That was the classic example, right? Because he never had himself, a number 2 guy necessarily. And, William, thank you for the phone call. You're right. And I think that maybe the fan takes exception with the method more than anything else because it is a little bit unconventional. And, look, unless you've been hiding out underneath a rock and you haven't been paying attention, the players are the ones who run the show here in the NBA, hands down. All right, Anthony Davis, a guy like Anthony Davis should spend at least 10 years with the team that drafted him, right? I mean, when you get a talent that transformational, that good, the guy should at least be on his team for a good number of years and give them every chance to put a winner out there. So Anthony Davis's contract is up in a year. He goes to the Pelicans and he says, you know what, guys? Sorry, this ain't working out. I want to go. So then New Orleans has to say, okay, fine, we're going to move you because we don't want to let you walk out the door for absolutely nothing. Right? You want to be able to get something decent in return. But especially these small market clubs, you want the superstars on those teams. Now, the difficulty that they have is, number one, you're not going to be able to attract a lot of free agents. At least I'm talking big, major free agents who are going to really impact a title run. They don't want to go to those places. So the only way that you could possibly get them is via the trade or, of course, the draft. And then you hope maybe you get lucky in a case like in Oklahoma City, who decided to go all in, and they rolled the dice on Paul George in the trade with Indiana. And everybody thought that after 1 year, Paul George was going to be gone, and he was going to go sign maybe back home in California. Instead, he decided to commit long-term here to Oklahoma City. Now, they haven't won anything, so maybe that's not the best of examples, but I think you catch my drift. You have to be a little bit creative if you're a front office guy in the NBA. And that's what you hope if you're Masai Ujiri and the Raptors, that you went all in for Kawhi, you went in and won a championship, you bent over backwards for him, you convinced him that this is going to be his best basketball situation that he could possibly get himself into, and you hope that he signs up now long-term and decides to stick with your program. That's the way you got to play it. Because the Raptors aren't attracting major free agents, franchise-type player free agents from elsewhere, right? The Indiana Pacers aren't going to be attracting those type of free agents. The Memphis Grizzlies are not going to be attracting those type of players. The small markets really have a hard time when it comes to bringing in that top-notch talent. Hell, look at the New York Knicks. They couldn't get those guys, and they play in the Mecca and the number 1 market in the country. Let us continue on and say hi to James in New Jersey. James, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Good. Let me just speak my piece on this. I think Kawhi has done enough. He won the MVP, final MVP with the Spurs, won the Finals MVP with the Raptors. I think he can, wherever he decides to go, I think he's earned it. See, the differences with him possibly leaving, what LeBron did and what Durant did. See, I don't agree with what LeBron did, but at the same time, I think
Which
Durant
LeBron you're
takes
talking
the cake.
about? You're talking about the first one going to Miami?
Yeah, when he went to Miami. I didn't agree with it, but I understood it because he couldn't get past the Celtics. So instead of joining the Celtics, he just made his own team and ended up beating the Celtics. Till I die, I'll never agree with what Kevin Durant did. I don't care what anybody says to me. There's the weakest move of all time. Those guys on one team, if they're all healthy, they can win as many championships as they wanted to. Doesn't matter. Nobody would beat them. Now, I don't even think Anthony Davis and LeBron would be able to beat that Golden State team.
Oh, no. You're right about that. And James, I agree with you, and I thank you for the phone call here. And now, look, this might be unpopular, and it doesn't matter, right? Because what's done is done, and the season's over. But if Klay Thompson, forget about Kevin Durant, if Klay Thompson doesn't get hurt in Game 6, we have a Game 7, and then all bets are off. What happens? All bets are off. Look, I was down on the Durant situation when he left Oklahoma City to go to Golden State. I hated it. I yelled and screamed about it on the radio for probably at least 2 weeks, like everybody else. That was a bad look. I said back then, Durant going to Golden State looked worse in terms of the optics than what LeBron did even going to Miami. It looked worse. You joined a championship caliber team already, a team that kicked your butt and prevented you from getting to a championship when you were in Oklahoma City and you had another superstar there in Russell Westbrook, and on and on and on. I don't need to revisit history. What's done is done. What happened, happened. Okay, now we wish KD the best. Go get healthy, heal up, and then go see if he can win in Brooklyn. We'll talk about that situation, too, before our show is done. Got to get into that. Let's say hi to Donovan. He's in Oklahoma. Donovan, you're on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. How are you?
I'm doing good. My question is, now, back when, LeBron went to Miami, they had Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. All three of them are dominant ball players. And then at the same time, we had the same scenario happen in OKC when we had Paul George, Westbrook, and Melo all joining forces.
And it didn't work out. Didn't work out in Oklahoma City.
No. My question is, do you think if Kawhi does sign with the Lakers, do you think they're going to connect instantly like LeBron in the back did back in Miami? Or do you think they're going to crash and burn like OKC did?
Well, they need more help. First and foremost, you just can't have those three guys and say, all right, let's go win a championship, right? I mean, you got Kyle Kuzma, who's there too. I'm not putting him on that level. Like some people want to say if Kawhi goes to the Lakers, they got a big four. Not yet. We still need to see a little bit more of Kyle Kuzma. He's still a notch below. He might blossom into the level of those other guys. But, I mean, you think about those arguably are three of the top 5 players in the NBA. Kuzma's not on that level yet. Relax. Good player, good up-and-comer, but relax. Now where the Lakers are going to have to get creative if they get him, if you're Rob Pelinka and company, is how are you going to figure out a way to be able to sign some of these supporting players off of the bench? Those are important. You need those type of players. Look, I know the stars get all the credit. I know the stars are the ones that ultimately you're going to sink or swim with, but you got to be able to still make it work because your supporting cast could make or break you. Look at what happened with the Toronto Raptors. Do they win that championship without some of those bench guys? Do they win a championship without the Freddie Van Vliets of the world? Do they? The answer is no. You need some of that supporting cast. The Lakers need some shooters right now. The edge that I give them, though, and the one area that maybe isn't as popular and isn't talked about as much with the construction of a talented group like that, is when you have a Kawhi Leonard and you have an Anthony Davis for starters. Think about how locked down they're going to be on the defensive side of the floor. I mean, oh my gosh. Good luck trying to score on that team. And LeBron can play defense when he wants to, but LeBron, he's how many years into the league, he's going to want to rest his legs a little bit. But the fact that you have those two guys back there holding things down on the defensive side of things, that means LeBron doesn't have to exert as much effort on the defensive end of the floor as maybe he would otherwise, which means he's allowed to be fresher when it comes to scoring, and it allows him to be a little bit fresher maybe later on in the season when the games start to take on even greater importance. Don't sleep on defense. Defense is important here. And with those two guys, all bets are off. Sam's in California. He's up next year on ESPN Radio. What's up, Sam?
Hey, Dan. Thanks a lot for having me. My question for you is, if Kawhi does sign with the Lakers, is it safe to say that LeBron would be the third best player on the team? And if so, will the Lakers still allow him to have the same say in personnel decisions, or will that balance power shift towards Kawhi and AD.
It's interesting. Sam, it's funny that you say that about LeBron being the third best player on the team. You can't make that assumption just yet. I hear what you're saying, right? Because, look at where LeBron is in his career. I don't know how many seasons he has left of top flight basketball. And I think what was scary for him last year, and maybe not as scary for us who watched the game, but it was an eye-opener that this guy's been Superman like his whole career. He's been indestructible. He's played through injuries. He's managed to stay on the floor. And then last year, all that fell by the wayside when he got hurt on Christmas night against Golden State. Right? I mean, that was a pretty serious injury. Maybe even could have kept him out a little bit longer. So I think that forced him to maybe examine his basketball mortality a little bit. And I think it also did the same for us. Because now we have to look at this player and realize he's not 25 anymore. Shoot, he's not 30 anymore. Maybe he can't be asked to do as much. So having other guys like AD and if it is Kawhi, Kyle Kuzma, all right, maybe that takes some of the pressure off of him. But even if you sign those guys, the Lakers' window to be a championship squad, with LeBron being the driving force, one way or the other, I think we're maybe only looking at another year or two. So it's funny that Sam asked that question. LeBron as the central figure for the Los Angeles Lakers, you might be looking at only a couple of years tops. Just about where he is in his career and what happens, not to say that it's going to, but what happens if the injuries come back again this season and he isn't able to take the floor as much as maybe we would expect to see him out there. Then what? Look at what happened with Golden State, with Klay and Kevin Durant here in the finals. They went down like that. It could happen to anybody. And certainly your odds are greater as you continue to play more and more and more. And not only has he been in the league for 15 years, think of how many consecutive trips to the NBA Finals. When you go 8 straight seasons, you're tacking on, on average, an extra 20 games a year. So if you do the math, that's like 160 games during that span. That's the equivalent of 2 extra full seasons of basketball on that odometer. That's a lot to absorb. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. Got to get to the fallout, too, with New York, whether it's the Knicks, the Nets, the fact that the Knicks couldn't get a marquee free agent, the fact that the Nets got a couple of them. What is that going to mean for the balance of power? Jonathan Givony is going to join us from Vegas coming up at the top of the hour here to talk about Summer League and the debut of Zion Williamson tonight and what that's going to be like. It's Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
This show and all of ESPN. Back to Kawhi Leonard. It seems as if the Lakers may have the upper hand, but we're hearing that's not the case. Nobody knows. I can tell you this, and I've said this 2 days ago. I'll say it again. I don't know whether it's true or not. I have no idea. I don't know Kawhi Leonard. He doesn't really talk. Never rude. Always a gentleman. But I got to tell you that if you talk to the Los Angeles Clippers, they don't believe for 1 second that Kawhi Leonard will be lost to them in favor of the Los Angeles Lakers. They believe Kawhi Leonard is coming to them or he's staying in Toronto. And somehow, some way, you got to ask yourself, as basketball fans, as basketball lovers, you got to ask yourself this question. It's very, very important. You got to ask yourself this question. If you are a true basketball fan, do you want Kawhi Leonard in the Los Angeles Lakers uniform playing alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis for the next 3 years? Or do you want Kawhi Leonard playing for the Clippers and competing with LeBron and Anthony Davis for the next several years in LA? See, if from a ratings perspective, it's not great for basketball during the regular season because you got stars on the West Coast in the Western Conference, and obviously your ratings are going to be compromised because if you don't have those preeminent stars in the East, those 7:30 games in the East on the East Coast are not going to generate the level of interest that you would like. And those Laker games are going to be starting at 10 or 10:30. And most people are going to be to bed by halftime, if not earlier. And some of those games are going to get missed. That's why it's such a big deal to some degree that Kyrie chose Brooklyn. And Kevin Durant chose Brooklyn. But for me, it's not even about that. For me, it's about Kawhi Leonard is a superstar. He's one of the top 5 players in basketball. And to have 3 of the top 5 players on one team, to me, it's unfair.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
We welcome you back into the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming to you live from Seaport District at Pier 17. Being brought to you by Chase. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. at 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. At Dan Graca on Twitter is where you can find me there, Graca. And I want to remind you that Golic and Wingo are going to be live Monday, July the 8th from Cleveland for the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, brought to you by Marathon. Marathon is fueling the American spirit. A few days left in the unofficial first half of the baseball season. Then we're going to break for a few days. All-Star festivities, home run derby on Monday. Remember, $1 million to the winner this year. They're spicing it up a little bit, and you got a few guys in the home run derby contest this season that, you know, are either rookies or first or second year players who aren't making $1 million yet. So they're going to go all out and try to win that prize. I mean, that is, you know, a fortune to guys like that here. So it's going to be a lot of fun. You got a good group this year. And, of course, the All-Star Game coming up on Tuesday. And I always say this, that, you know, the baseball All-Star Game, hands down, the best of any of the All-Star Games of the 4 major sports. It is, period, no ifs, ands, or buts. Okay, baseball's a tough game to kind of circumvent, where in these other sports, whether it's the Pro Bowl, where, you know, they barely try, NBA All-Star Game, nobody plays defense. It's first team to 200 that ends up winning the game here. But baseball, you're not just going to throw a meatball right down the middle because guys are going to end up hitting it, you know, 500, 600 feet, it seems like. They don't do that. They try. They go all out. And the best part about it is they got rid of that silly charade about accounting for home field advantage in the World Series. So we'll get into all that stuff a little bit later on here, kind of do a look back at the first half of the season and kind of summarize where baseball is here at the midway point. We'll do that before our afternoon is through. Coming up here in a few minutes, we're going to talk to Jonathan Gavoni, our ESPN NBA draft analyst. He's out in Vegas because he got the Summer League starting up tonight here out in Sin City, and the marquee attraction is going to be the Knicks against the Pelicans. RJ Barrett takes on Zion Williamson. It's 9:30 Eastern time tonight on ESPN. You can watch it. I'll be in front of the television. Can't wait to watch that one. Not just because you have the 2 Duke teammates going up against one another, and clearly Zion coming into this draft with all the hype in the world. However, RJ Barrett might be the guy that ends up having the better pro career. And from all the people that I've spoken to, both on the collegiate level, NBA scouts and whatnot, you know, there are a good amount of folks that actually have that consensus that RJ's going to be the better pro just because, you know, he might have an easier time offensively than Zion. You know, he's a guy who can create his own shot. You know, he's a guy that might be able to adapt a little bit easier to some of the looks that he's going to get from defenses, whether it's X's and O's personnel on that next level. Zion's going to have his work cut out for him. Not to say that he's not going to be able to overcome it, but he's going to be challenged certainly by what he's going to see here on this next level, and he gets his first exposure to it tonight. So we'll talk to Jonathan about that coming up in just a few minutes. And then also in the second hour, we'll break down the Knicks, we'll break down the Nets, how New York basketball was changed by the events of what just happened here in the past week. So we still got a lot to get to here over the next 60 minutes. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. Smith here on a Friday. We're coming right back on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
Discover card? Hi, do you have a travel card? We do.
The Stephen A. Smith Show starts right now.
Rolling along. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. Smith here on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. And the Stephen A. Smith Show is brought to you by Pennzoil. Motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. And ESPN Radio also presented by Progressive Insurance. Quote, buy, and save on home insurance with Progressive's new Home Quote Explorer. It's only at Progressive.com. Time now to switch a little gears. We've done a lot of basketball in that first hour, but of more importance this evening, of course, out in Vegas, we have the start of the NBA Summer League, and covering it for us here at ESPN is our outstanding draft analyst. He's Jonathan Givony, who was nice enough to give us some time here on the program. Jonathan, it's Dan Graca here on ESPN Radio back in New York. Thanks for joining me. Curious, how pumped up? What's the anticipation like? The city of Vegas there. How palpable is the buzz for Summer League getting underway?
Well, I'm standing right outside the arena right now. It's crazy. There's a huge line. People are waiting to get in. A million scalpers. It's sold out today and tomorrow. So, I've been coming to Summer League for almost 15 years now, since the very start, and this is by far the most amped I can remember the city being for Summer League. Every taxi driver, every waiter, all they want to talk about is how's Zion going to do, and so it's awesome. I mean, it's amazing what this thing has turned into.
No doubt, it's must-watch TV tonight, and of course, we have it covered for you here on ESPN. The big matchup this evening between the Knicks and the Pelicans. Do you think, Jonathan, that it was a little bit more than a coincidence that you have R.J. Barrett, you got Zion Williamson going head-to-head and scheduled as that first game to kind of kick off the proceedings?
No, not at all. They waited until after the draft to announce the schedule, and they know what the fans are looking for. I mean, if John Morant was playing, I'm sure he would be front and center too, and he would be on ESPN. And so, these guys have some experience now with this, and they know. I mean, I remember coming here a few years back. And seeing, I think it was Andrew Wiggins' first game, and he was in the small gym, and it was just complete chaos. It was madness trying to get in. So, they put the big show in the big gym and on ESPN in prime time, 9:30 Eastern, and so it's going to be huge.
The interaction thus far with Zion, and we know that, he has a tremendous amount of weight on his shoulders. Everybody expects him to be the next best thing. I mean, from merchandising on down, the guy's expected to be a stud here. But from your interactions here post-draft, how do you think he's handled all of it?
I think he's handling it great. I've been around Zion since he was 16 years old. I've interviewed him several times and his family as well, and just have watched, the development of him, his body, as well as, the attention around him. He's in great hands. He's a very, very humble kid. I think if it were up to him, he would just go play pickup at the rec center and just hang out. I don't think he loves the attention. I think he embraces it. He understands it. He accepts it. But and the best part about Zion is just how great of a teammate he is, how much people love playing with him. And, that's what I'm really looking forward to seeing today is, Zion with the ball in his hands, playing that Giannis Antetokounmpo type role, handling it in the open floor, getting others involved. As a creator, I mean, that's where Zion is going to be at his peak, and that's going to be really fun to watch tonight.
You said he doesn't love all the attention, but whether fairly or unfairly, let's be honest, Anthony Davis has moved on. He is now the face of this New Orleans franchise. Is he okay with it? But do you think that he's prepared at such a young age without even having to step foot yet on an NBA floor? Do you think that he's ready for what awaits him here, probably starting tonight in Vegas?
I think he is. Just, that year at Duke, I think really helped prepare him. And also even, watching him in high school, it was a show. Every time you went to go see him at the Hoop Hall Classic in Springfield, for example, that game was on ESPN. There were fans lined up around the building, and that was 2 years ago. So he's as prepared as you can be for what's coming, and I think it really helps him, to end up in a market like New Orleans. You could kind of see a sigh of relief after the lottery results were announced. I think he would have been fine with the Lakers or with the Knicks, but I think New Orleans is better suited for his personality than some of these other, places where, he's going to have cameras in his face everywhere he goes and a million media people dissecting every move. He's going to have that anyway, but just not to the same degree that someone like R.J. Barrett's going to have, for example.
Oh, definitely. And we'll get to him in a second. We're talking with Jonathan Givony, our ESPN draft analyst, here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. As a whole, this New Orleans roster, they've undergone some changes, of course, in the last month or so. And, David Griffin, I think universally has been applauded for the job that he's done here, Jonathan, bringing in not only just some young talent in the trade with the Lakers, but also stockpiling some nice assets in terms of draft choices. I mean, it's really tough to pick apart how he's been able to kind of refocus after having to deal away a franchise-type player.
Yeah, he's done an amazing job. I love the free agent signings that they made, especially J.J. Redick, putting the best shooter in the NBA alongside Zion. That's exactly what he needs. We're talking about Zion as a guy that handles the ball, that's going to be creating for others, playing that Giannis-type role surrounded by shooters, and that, having him, Darius Miller, Nicolo Melli. I mean, you could see they really targeted shooting in this offseason, and that's going to really benefit Zion. And I think, David Griffin being around LeBron for, so much of LeBron's early career is really going to help prepare Zion for this, because he's been through it all already, and he knows, the amount of attention that's going to be on this kid. And I just think it's a great fit, and it's great for the NBA.
Yeah, it's a really good point you just made there about the David Griffin link between LeBron's past and now hopefully what is undergoing with Zion Williamson and all the promise and potential that he has moving forward. I know we're still very early in the process here, Jonathan, but I'll just throw it out there. From where you're sitting right now, do you think that it's feasible that this New Orleans team could find themselves competing for a playoff spot here in the Western Conference?
I would be surprised. I think the West is still pretty loaded. It's hard to point to, any of those teams that are going to fall out of the race. And then you look at, the strides that you're anticipating a team like Sacramento, for example, making. I think it might be a little bit too much to expect, but I don't think that needs to be a huge priority. Also, I mean, if they make it, that would be great. But I think this is going to be a development season. This is going to be about Zion, putting him in position to be successful, about Nickeil Alexander-Walker as well. And so I think that they're positioned really, really well here long term.
All right, let's look at the opponent tonight, the New York Knicks. And certainly they've gotten plenty of attention here over the last several weeks, not just because of what was supposed to be for them here in the offseason. They didn't land Durant, they didn't land Kyrie, but they did get themselves R.J. Barrett in this draft. And I mean, you talk to a lot of folks, this kid has a world of potential. I'll even throw in there, Jonathan, that he's probably going to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, even though he and Zion are friends. That's all he's had to hear about for the last several months. Zion this, Zion that. I'm sure he's going to want to go out there and prove that, hey, I'm just as good, if not better than he is.
Yeah, I mean, R.J. Barrett has done it all for relative to a 19-year-old player. He gets to play an NBA game. He won multiple high school championships. He won the FIBA World Championship with Canada. He was a beast on the AAU circuit. He had a great season at Duke. He did things that, nobody's ever done in the ACC for a freshman. So, I do think that RJ is going to come out tonight looking to show people what he is all about, because he's a phenomenal prospect in his own right. And I'm curious to see the role that they put him in, too. We talked throughout the pre-draft process about how much better RJ Barrett is going to look in the NBA with NBA spacing and shooters around him. And then you look at some of the signings that they made, and you really have to wonder about that. It's going to be pretty cramped out there, but I think, I'm interested to see how he interacts today with Mitchell Robinson and with Kevin Knox. I mean, it's got some interesting young talent on their roster already, and so I'm really looking forward to RJ, too. I've been covering him since he was 15 years old, so I can't wait to see how he looks.
A year ago this time, RJ Barrett was the number one prospect coming into the college basketball season out of high school, right? And, as the hot freshman, not necessarily being Zion Williamson. But if you want to compare and contrast, Jonathan, RJ and how the Knicks are going to handle him versus New Orleans and how they're going to go about Zion, I mean, RJ's going to have a lot of expectations. It's New York City. It's Madison Square Garden, a team that certainly had some misfortune over the last several years. Are the Knicks going to bring him along slowly, or are they going to expect him to kind of hit the ground running here?
I think they're going to put the ball in his hands and make him the star he is, and I think he's got a real case to be Rookie of the Year. The Knicks have to be a little bit embarrassed by the way that the last few weeks played out for them, and one of the ways that they can kind of ease the concerns of fans, the media, and all that is by saying, we've got a superstar in our hand in R.J. Barrett. So I don't expect him to come off the bench and, be a role player. I think that he's going to get going early and often. He's going to have the ball in his hands. And, the Knicks are going to try and make a run at the playoffs here. I mean, those last couple of spots in the East are pretty wide open. So I don't think you can completely rule them out.
Jonathan Gavoni, our ESPN NBA draft analyst, joining me here on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. How about some of this other talent, as you mentioned, on this Knicks squad? Guys that got a little bit of an exposure to the NBA last year. I mean, Kevin Knox was a lottery pick. By all accounts, it looks like they got a steal with Mitchell Robinson in round number 2. Very raw, but showed a tremendous amount of athleticism, especially on the defensive end of the floor, rebounding. You know, is there still that growth you think that those two in particular are going to reach as a member of this basketball team?
I think absolutely. Both of them were one and dones, and they were among the youngest players in the NBA last year. Kevin Knox had maybe the most exciting summer league of any rookie last year, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing him tonight because, you know, with a year of NBA experience underneath his belt, he didn't really have a great rookie year. He was extremely inefficient. There were a lot of ups and downs, partially due to injury. But I think that you know, this setting is tailor-made for a second-year player to go out and explode. And that's why I'm really looking forward to seeing that interaction between him and RJ. You know, RJ fancies himself a James Harden type of player, and he's going to want to show off his passing ability, his court vision. A lot of people have knocked him for being a little bit selfish, a little bit inefficient. I think he's going to take that to heart tonight and try and get others involved. And, you know, when you have two athletes like Knox and Mitchell Robinson running the floor, being able to throw lobs to those guys, that really helps.
Unfortunately, Jonathan, you know, you're going to have a lot of guys in this summer league that, you know, we would have been accustomed to seeing play, but unfortunately their status is being held up because of potential trades that haven't been made official yet, whether it's DeAndre Hunter and Culver and even Jackson Hayes. That does take a little bit of the appeal out of these proceedings, does it not?
Well, I think they get officially approved tomorrow on the 6th, and so I would think that would be first thing in the morning, and I do think that they pushed some of the schedules back. So not all those teams, well, I think Chicago plays tonight, but we will see Kobe White, I believe. And so it's a long summer league. It's 10 days. And so all these guys are going to have plenty of time to showcase themselves.
It should be a lot of fun. And John Morant, you know, underwent that knee procedure. Nothing serious here. He should be good to go for the start of the season by all accounts, right? But he's another player that's not going to at least be out on the floor here in Las Vegas. But his upside as a pro, remember, there was, you know, still some back and forth, if you will, once the draft rolled around. You know, should Morant be the second pick? Should it be RJ Barrett? You know, breaking it down, and I know that they play different positions and whatnot, but what are your thoughts here on John Morant's NBA prospects?
And is a phenomenal NBA prospect. I had RJ Barrett number 2 ahead of him, more so because of his positional fit in today's NBA. You know, you look at the playoffs, you see all these 6'7" guys handling the ball, you know, taking rebounds off the glass, pushing in transition, getting others involved, playing pick and roll. And John Morant is a one-position player, but he's the best passer in this draft, and he's, you know, probably the best athlete too after Zion. So, you know, his upside is significant, and I mean, I think the Memphis Grizzlies have done a great job pairing him with talent, with Jaren Jackson and Brandon Clark. They've made some really smart trades here with Mike Conley. I mean, they're one of the big winners of the offseason.
Jonathan Gavoni, ESPN draft analyst. He's out in Vegas for the Summer League. Jonathan, appreciate the time as always, and enjoy it here tonight. It should be a heck of a lot of fun. We'll be watching.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
All right. And look, 9:30 tonight, ESPN, Knicks, Pelicans, getting things kick-started here. Day one of the Summer League, Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett. It really should be a blast. Must-watch TV, you know, for basketball here in the month of July. And they do it well. You know, the Summer League has grown leaps and bounds over the years. Now the fact that you have these hotshot rookies who are playing in it, you know, some of the younger players in the league who gained some experience in the past and now are getting just another opportunity to showcase and to harness their skills a little bit more. You know, like the guys we mentioned with New York, Knox, Mitchell Robinson. You just hope that everybody comes out of this thing with one piece, knock on wood, and there's no injuries that could possibly curtail their development here. But as far as New York basketball is concerned, you know, with the Knicks and the Nets, and obviously they're contrasting storylines here because the Nets, by all accounts, were the big winners. They got Kyrie Irving. They got Kevin Durant. They're not going to be able to pair them up on the floor for another 12 months, you know, in meaningful games. But they have to be enthused as to where they were just a few short years ago. And I know that not all circumstances are identical, but if you're a Knicks fan and if you're somebody that supports the franchise, look no further to the team in Brooklyn if you want to maybe be optimistic about where things stand right now with your basketball team. Because a few years ago, the Nets, still trying to rise from the ashes of what was a dreadful trade that they made with the Boston Celtics, where they tried to go all in and bring in all the old players from the Celtics. Billy King gave up about 9 million draft choices, and the best they got out of it was one lousy playoff victory. One round. That is it. And then they ended up moving forward with players who had moved on, a roster that was void of talent. You didn't even have your first-round draft choices. And the way that Sean Marks, the general manager, along with head coach Kenny Atkinson and everybody in that organization, have been able to slowly but surely piece this team together, make smart free agent signings along the way, not breaking the bank for guys or giving out bad contracts or whatnot, giving yourself the cap space. Remember, if you have cap space, that allows you to take on bad contracts from other teams that are maybe expiring, but then also that allows you to maybe recoup a draft pick or two. And we saw that along the way with the Brooklyn Nets. So where you build a nice foundation, and then when you're in a position to go big game hunting like they were here in the summertime, you're able to cash in. Knicks are taking a wise and smart approach to hopefully being able to do the same thing. Now, these young players that they have, the Knox, the Mitchell Robinson, you want to throw Alonzo Trier, RJ Barrett, guys like that, you hope that they all pan out. They went out and spent a bunch of money in just 24 hours of free agency. None of them names that are making people run to the box office and say, I got to buy season tickets, even though Julius Randle's, he's got a chance to be a solid 2010 guy for this basketball team. But the best part about all the free agent signings that the Knicks made, they're good locker room guys. They're veterans. They're going to give you an honest effort. And after next season, the Knicks control their fate. So if they want to move on from any of them, if they want to move on from all of them or none of them, they can do so. And then free up cap space again for next offseason in the event, and we know that Anthony Davis is the biggest name on the free agent market next summer. Not to say that he's going to leave LA or not, but if he does, they have the ability to pounce. Remember, because Anthony Davis was considering either the Knicks or the Lakers when it came time for him to be traded. Draymond Green is going to be available next offseason. I personally wouldn't max the guy out, but that's their choice, not mine. Not a great free agent class, but the Knicks would then at least still put themselves in position to be part of the Giannis sweepstakes 2 summers from now. And we got a long way to go between now and then. Who's to say he's even going to be a free agent? But at least you give yourself the opportunity. And what if, as Jonathan Givony was telling us, and I tend to agree, what happens if RJ Barrett is indeed the real deal? What happens if he ends up being the better pro than Zion Williamson? And then all of a sudden, when we talk about a Knicks team that doesn't have a superstar, you have one already homegrown in RJ Barrett. A teenager, essentially. A guy who's got so much basketball ahead of him. A guy who wants to be part of your franchise, and he develops right before your eyes. That's the best thing that could possibly happen to you as a fan. When you draft a guy, you bring him into your program, you see him develop as a homegrown talent, you almost claim him as one of yours. That's even sweeter than bringing on an accomplished player in free agency. Even if they've won championships in the past, if they've won MVPs in the past, that makes it that much more sweet. But they got to get there first. And there's no guarantees. But I like what the Knicks are doing. They didn't throw ridiculous money at guys that probably weren't worthy of max contracts. They took a patient approach. And I know that you've been hearing patience for the last few years. And I know that it was a punch to the gut to not be able to even get a meeting with some of these marquee players. But it doesn't mean the sky is falling, and it doesn't mean that this thing can't turn around. All right? Things didn't go their way with the lottery. Not on the surface, but it may have when it's all said and done, because the third pick might end up being better than the first pick. Right? Just think back several years ago when Kawhi Leonard was drafted, in the teens, mind you. Was anybody saying on draft night that Kawhi Leonard is a 2-time finals MVP in the making? One of the top 2 or 3 players in the NBA in the making? No. Guy was even traded on draft night, you might remember. So there is a lot that can still happen here. As far as Brooklyn is concerned, they got star power. They're going to get some headlines. Kyrie, the local boy, comes home. That's great. But they got rid of D'Angelo Russell. And I know D'Angelo Russell's not a perfect player, but D'Angelo Russell was a guy that helped you get to the playoffs last year. So now you take him out, you put Kyrie in. Last time I checked, Kyrie Irving wasn't necessarily a guy who ever embraced the number one role on the team. He wanted out of Cleveland. He wanted to go to Boston to be that guy. But how the heck did that work out the last couple of seasons? They made it to the conference finals 2 years ago with Kyrie on the sidelines. And the last time I checked, the team that Kyrie had around him in Boston the last 2 seasons is better than what he's going to have alongside him in Brooklyn this year. So all this talk about a championship and a title for the Brooklyn Nets, that might happen one day, but it's not going to happen this basketball season. Kevin Durant's got to heal up and he's got to get out on the floor. And there's no assurances that he's going to be able to pick up and play like the KD that we're used to seeing. So yeah, Nets got the headlines, but now let me see them actually go out there and win 50-55 games before I'm a real believer. It might just be a marginal improvement for this upcoming season as far as I'm concerned. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. It is a Friday here on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
The 2019 ESPYs auction is now.
Stay with the Mavs for a minute. We
Go
just
ahead.
signed Boban today.
Okay. I like Boban.
Are the Mavs going to join the EU later?
I don't know. It's quite possible between Luka Doncic, between Kristaps Porzingis, and now Boban. I do. I mean, damn. Yeah, that is a good point. It is a good point. Appreciate the call, man. Thank you, Eric. You're live with Stephen A. What's up?
Stephen A., it's a pleasure to talk to you this morning. I just wanted to go back to what you were talking about earlier about Kawhi joining the Lakers and how you like to see him join the Clippers maybe and see the guys play against each other.
Okay.
Well, I just want to go back to remind you about a time when the Lakers put together another star-studded team, even though a couple of the stars were a little older, Shaq, Kobe, Karl Malone, and
really? That's where you going? That's where you going? Really?
No,
why would that be an analogy? Why?
Well, because don't forget that they did go to the championship, but they lost to a team.
Your fault. Listen, I see what you're saying. You talk about when they lost to Detroit.
Exactly.
Listen, what I'm telling you is this. Karl Malone wasn't Karl Malone anymore, and Gary Payton certainly wasn't Gary Payton anymore.
They were a little older. I know they were a little older.
They weren't in the primes of their career. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay. I got you.
You know better than that. You couldn't compare that. How the hell you going to even bring that up as a comparison with LeBron and AD
comparing.
26 and Kawhi being 27?
I'm not comparing. I'm not really trying to compare. I'm just trying to say that's why they play the game. Even though you might have a super team, don't necessarily mean that you're going to win. That's why they play the game.
That's what. So in other words, you held on online to get on the phone on the national airwaves to tell me that's why you play the games. That's the best you could do.
Just to remind you, because I know you know that.
That's the best you could do. To remind me, you called up to be on hold to remind me that they still got to play the games. Wow.
That's the best I got today.
Happy 4th of July.
That's not good enough.
It's not good enough for me. It's not good enough for me. You can do better than that. Have a good day, though. Enjoy the 4th of July. Don't eat too many hot dogs and burgers, but eat some.
Yeah, you have to go back to never. There's never been parity in the NBA. You got to have somebody that is straight down. There is no medium. There's love or hate. And the Lakers, with 3 superstars, immediately become love or hate at the highest level.
We also need a league that feels like it has some competitive balance. You can't watch a season of basketball when you already know who's going to win it all.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Stephen A. Smith Show here on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. at 888-SAY-ESPN. That's our telephone number, 888-729-3776. You want to tweet at me, you can find me at Dan Graca, Graca. And if you missed any of the show today, go check it out on demand. In the Stephen A. Smith podcast, it's brought to you by Eno, the Capital One assistant that catches things that might look wrong with your credit card. It sends an alert to your phone, and it helps you fix them. What's in your wallet? See CapitalOne.com for details. A lot of NBA today, but if you're just joining us, no, you didn't miss the Kawhi Leonard decision. We wait just like we've been waiting since Sunday. Somebody needs to tap Kawhi on the shoulders and tell him, you know what, everybody else is pretty much all locked up here. The rest of the NBA world is kind of waiting on you so we can go on with the rest of our summers. But, he's taking his leisurely time. He's very methodical. And, the great thing about Kawhi is, and maybe that makes him an unconventional superstar, is that you have no idea what he's thinking or what he's feeling or, which way the wind is blowing with him. That's kind of been his MO. And, he's staying true to it here with the biggest decision he's had to make, certainly since entering the NBA. Let's get to the phones here and say hi to Lucas in Colorado. Lucas, you're on the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for taking my call.
What's up, Lucas?
So, my question is, do you actually believe Kawhi Leonard will sign with a team on the Western Conference, or do you think he'll stay in this place somewhere in the Eastern Conference to continue his legacy as the dynasty killer?
I hope he stays in Toronto. I said that earlier. That would be my preference. But he's got to do what makes him happy. I think wherever he goes, he's still going to be successful and win. Now, if he goes back to Toronto, I'll repeat what I said earlier. He goes back to Toronto, they're the favorites once again to repeat as NBA champions. I truly believe that here. He goes out to L.A., then a lot of people are going to look at the Lakers. I'm talking about the Lakers, that is. If he goes to the Lakers, people are going to look at them and say that they're the favorites, even though they still got some work to do with, the shaping and the fine-tuning of that roster, because players like that are what can make or break you. It's those supporting pieces that were so instrumental to the Toronto Raptors and what they ultimately were able to accomplish. That's what concerns me a little bit, even, about a team like the Philadelphia 76ers. Yeah, they might have top to bottom the best starting five in the NBA with the most star power, but that bench was a little bit of an eyesore last year, and I think that with some of the losses they've had here this offseason already, that's still a big concern for me as I look to Philadelphia, even as we start this upcoming season. Let's say hi to Colton in Minneapolis. Colton, you're on ESPN Radio. What's going on?
How you doing?
Good, Colton. What's up?
I'm wondering who you think is in a better position going forward, the New York Knicks or the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Difficult question. You look at Minnesota right now, they have at least one known quantity, and that's Karl Anthony Towns. He's a superstar. He's a guy that I think is a legitimate franchise player. Andrew Wiggins is, what is Andrew Wiggins? The guy's an enigma. The guy's a mystery right now. It's hard to say. I mean, I'll probably have to go with, believe it or not, I'll say New York for one reason. I like the way that they're set up moving forward in terms of draft choices. Remember, they have those extra couple of first-round picks that they got in that Kristaps Porzingis trade with Dallas. Don't they have, I think, 7 first-rounders over the next 5 years, if I'm not mistaken? I think I'm pretty sure about that one. They have that. They have the cap space. And I still think, even though they haven't been able to land one of these marquee free agents, is Minnesota ever going to be able to attract that guy? That's the question I have about the Timberwolves moving forward here. And, they really have had a hard time since Kevin Garnett left to really be able to establish a consistent program moving forward. And then they got caught up in all that Jimmy Butler drama. And that's another thing. We haven't even talked about that here for a second. I don't know what Jimmy Butler's thinking. Jimmy Butler, all he talks about is he wants to win, he wants to win, he wants to win. He went from Chicago, he forced his way out of there, he ends up going to Minneapolis, then he ends up going to Philadelphia, and now when it's all said and done, he's in Miami. Is Miami on the verge of doing anything here? I don't think so. I mean, Pat Riley, ever since LeBron James walked out of the door and went back to Cleveland, I was kind of under the assumption that Pat was going to be able to get another star player down there, and it hasn't happened. So, and Jimmy Butler's got to cool it with the I want to win, I want to win, I want to win. If you wanted to win, why'd you go down to Miami? Unless Pat Riley threw all of his rings on the table and said, you're going to be the guy that we're going to build around. Jimmy Butler's not a guy you build around if you're going to be a championship team. I'm sorry. Not.
Okay, so, who do you think's going to play for the better record this season, the Knicks or the Wolves?
Oh, this season, I think you have to give the nod to the T-Wolves. But it's not just about this season, Colton. You got to think bigger picture than that. I still think both of these programs are still in the developmental stage. But if R.J. Barrett goes out there and he becomes, the hands-down rookie of the year, maybe the Knicks could win their 30 to 35 games. But that's still not where you want to be. Is Minnesota in a position to win any more than that in a Western Conference? I think New Orleans is going to put a better squad out on the floor this year, maybe even than Minnesota will. And that might not even be good enough to get to the postseason. Got to think big picture. Harry's in New York. He's on the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio. What's up, Harry? Harry, we got you.
What's up? Hey, how are you?
Good. What's up?
So I was wondering, do you think RJ will be as good as Giannis Antetokounmpo and play a role that he does in Milwaukee?
I mean, let the guy play a game first, Harry. You know what I'm saying? Let him play a game first before you could say, is he ever going to be an MVP caliber player? Because last time I checked, Giannis is the MVP of the league, right? I mean, let RJ Barrett go out there, become the franchise player for the New York Knicks first. You know, if he wins a Rookie of the Year award, fantastic. But let him do that before we get carried away about him being arguably, you know, one of the top 5 players in the sport. I think he's going to have a very, very good career. I think he's going to be a scoring machine. I think that it's certainly feasible. And I know that I'm putting a lot of expectations on him, but no more than anybody else is probably doing it in New York City or across the country that supports the New York Knicks. You expect RJ Barrett to eventually, when he's at the top of his game, to be somewhere averaging 25 points a game. Supposed to be a scorer. Supposed to be a guy that can go out there and get his own shot. Be a lethal assassin with the basketball. That's what you expect RJ Barrett to become. Let's say hi to Cornelius. He's in Missouri. Cornelius, you're on ESPN Radio. What's going on?
Yes, I have inside sources that Kawhi will go to the Clippers.
What are the inside sources? You?
I am very good friends with his uncle.
With his uncle?
Yes.
Oh, how good of friends? You guys break bread on occasion? What do you do?
Yeah, we used to go to high school together.
Oh, you went to high school together? He sounds like he's in high school now. Used to go to high school together. Okay, so take it to the bank there. Good source of Kawhi Leonard. He's going to the Clippers. Brian is in North Carolina. He's up next here on ESPN Radio. What's up, Brian?
Hey, how you doing today? How you doing?
Good, Brian. What's up?
I got a question.
Yeah.
Stephen A. Smith has been really rough on the Knicks, but as soon as they didn't get those marquee names,
let me just say, Brian, let me say this. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You can have your say in a second here. But Stephen A. is a friend, okay? Aside from being a colleague, he's a friend. I think the world of the guy. And I meant to reach out to him because he's worrying me. Like, I'm concerned about him. The meltdowns that he's had here because of what's happened with the Knicks and free agency, he's got to cool it. So I know he's not working today. I'm more than happy to hold it down for him. I hope he's someplace relaxing, maybe someplace near a beach with his feet up, with a nice cocktail in his hand, something like that, to where he can relax his mind a little and not get so obsessed over this basketball team yet. Things are going to be fine. Continue, Brian.
Yeah, but because that's one thing about it. Like, I think the Knicks, when they realized that they weren't getting that marquee talent, they went and picked up some pieces to build around R.J. Barrett. I think R.J. Barrett is I think of him much better than I do Zion Williamson. I think Zion Williamson needs to lose some weight and get in shape because the NBA is a completely different toll. I think R.J. Barrett is going to be the next superstar, and the Knicks are fortunate and lucky, and they should build youth around him and freaking give or take 2 or 3 years, they'll be right there.
Brian, I agree 100%. And if you think about it, okay, what have they done in the moves that they made that you say to yourself, oh my gosh, I can't believe they signed that guy? What are they doing? They're crazy. They're out of their minds. It's not like they went out there and threw a max contract at somebody like Harrison Barnes. And you said, what are you doing? That's not somebody you build around. Harrison Barnes isn't a franchise player. Imagine being stuck with a guy like him for 4 or 5 years, unable to get out of that deal. Then what happens? As I said, Julius Randle's here for a couple of seasons at the very least. He's a solid, if not good to very good player who might only be getting better here. Forget about what he lacks on the defensive end of the floor and so on and so forth. You know what? That'll come. But offensively, rebounding the basketball, he's a 2010 guy. And this team could use that right now. You know, and all these other veterans that they brought in a couple of guys who can knock down the three-point shot. It's 1 year plus a team option. If it doesn't work out, boom, you say goodbye. They gave themselves some flexibility. And going back to even prior to July 1st, let's just say they even ended up with Kevin Durant, and we threw that situation out there potentially. If they got KD, all you said was don't throw stupid max money at another free agent who's not worth it. You be patient, let KD heal up, get back out on the floor next season, but then you still have that flexibility to surround him with some better talent moving forward. They didn't get KD, but they kept the flexibility. And I'll take that any day of the week.
Oh, yeah, and the Brooklyn Nets, they did this before when they got Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett in their aging times and everything like that. And I think they did the same exact thing now with Kyrie and KD, the same exact thing. KD will not be the same after that Achilles tendon.
You know what, Brian? I don't know that. You don't know that. I thank you for checking in, though. As a basketball fan, though, I hope that's not the case. I hope that's not the case. You want to use a comparison about a guy coming back for injury like that? You look at Dominique, way back when, right? The human highlight film. He was roughly in that 31, 32 years of age when he popped his Achilles, came back, and he was still the same Dominique scoring the basketball. I think Kevin Durant, the way his skill set is, he could still find ways to be a lethal scorer, even if he's a bit compromised. I'm not giving you Kobe. Don't throw me Kobe, who he wasn't the same. Kobe was an old man when he hurt his Achilles. Okay, he was already at the end of the line. I don't want to hear that. And I don't put the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving acquisitions by Brooklyn in the same boat as bringing in the guys from the Celtics. There's still way more basketball left in these guys than what you had with Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett when they traded for them all those years ago. But I don't think it's going to make much of a difference for them this upcoming season. It really isn't. Because that supporting cast is still not where you want it to be if you're going to compete for a serious championship. I think Brooklyn right now, if you're asking me, if the season starts tomorrow, where are they in the Eastern Conference? Maybe no better than 6th. That's not saying much. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. Switch gears and drop in a little baseball conversation before we get out of Dodge. It's Dan Graca in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
With Vivid Seats app, it's easy to find awesome seats to any game, and all purchases are backed by their 100% guarantee. Go to the App Store or Google. Back to Kawhi Leonard. It seems as if the Lakers may have the upper hand, but we're hearing that's not the case. Nobody knows. I can tell you this, and I've said this 2 days ago. I'll say it again. I don't know whether it's true or not. I have no idea. I don't know Kawhi Leonard. He doesn't really talk. Never rude. Always a gentleman. But I got to tell you that if you talk to the Los Angeles Clippers, they don't believe for 1 second that Kawhi Leonard will be lost to them in favor of the Los Angeles Lakers. They believe Kawhi Leonard is coming to them or he's staying in Toronto. And somehow, some way, you got to ask yourself, as basketball fans, as basketball lovers, you got to ask yourself this question. It's very, very important. You got to ask yourself this question. If you are a true basketball fan, do you want Kawhi Leonard in the Los Angeles Lakers uniform playing alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis for the next 3 years? Or do you want Kawhi Leonard playing for the Clippers and competing with LeBron and Anthony Davis for the next several years in LA? See, if from a ratings perspective, it's not great for basketball during the regular season because you got stars on the West Coast in the Western Conference, and obviously your ratings are going to be compromised because if you don't have those preeminent stars in the East, those 7:30 games in the East on the East Coast are not going to generate the level of interest that you would like. And those Laker games are going to be starting at 10 or 10:30. And most people are going to be to bed by halftime, if not earlier. And some of those games are going to get missed. That's why it's such a big deal to some degree that Kyrie chose Brooklyn. And Kevin Durant chose Brooklyn. But for me, it's not even about that. For me, it's about Kawhi Leonard is a superstar. He's one of the top 5 players in basketball. And to have 3 of the top 5 players on one team, to me, it's unfair.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Stephen A. Smith Show here on a Friday on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. 888-729-3776 is our telephone number. At Dan Graca is where you can find me on Twitter. It's Graca. Checking out what's going on in Wimbledon today, and a remarkable comeback by the teenager, of course, the American Coco Gauff, who's fought back, lost the first set, was facing, I believe, down match point in the second set, won a tiebreaker, and is now on serve in the third in a really back-and-forth affair, which is going on about 2.5 hours. So the youngster making a name for herself here on the grass at the All England Club and continuing on. We'll see if she can pull this out and get into the round of 16. Monday, of course, round of 16, best day in tennis as far as I'm concerned. You get all 16 men, all 16 women, all on the court on the same day. They're on Monday in action. It's a phenomenal day, and if you're a tennis fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A couple of more minutes here. I just wanted to do a little bit of baseball because a few days left before we break for All-Star festivities in Cleveland. You got the Home Run Derby coming up on Monday night, which will be on ESPN. A loaded field. You got a nice mix, a nice blend of youngsters and some veterans, and $1 million to the winner. So you know that there's some incentive there. ESPN will have it for you. And then Tuesday you have the All-Star game. But right now I think you have a couple of storylines, starting with the Dodgers, of course, who are hands down the best team in the sport. They're sitting there with their 60th win, which they picked up last night. They've got 60 wins already before they've even played 90 games. They're an absolute machine. They've got strength in numbers in the starting pitching. Bellinger's having an MVP caliber season. If you say maybe they should go pick up a middle reliever or two to help bridge the gap to Jansen, I would be okay with that. That would be the one vulnerability you have as far as they're concerned. And the American League, you know, the Yankees right now have the best record. I think they have the American League East wrapped up already. I know you say you still have 80 games left, but I think they're going to, at the very least, win the East. I don't know about them getting to a World Series as presently constituted. I feel a heck of a lot better if you're Brian Cashman and you go out there and bring in another starting pitcher. I think that is of the utmost importance. But a couple of teams are kind of reminding you that it is such a long season when you're talking about playing 162. Number one is the Washington Nationals, who were left for dead about a month ago. Davey Martinez, everybody wanted him fired, me included. Since May the 24th, they're 26-10, best record in baseball. They'd be a wild card team if the season ended today. American League side, the Cleveland Indians, who got off to an awful start. Twins were running away with that Central Division. They were double-digit games behind. You look now, the Tribe are just 6 games back with still pretty much a half a season to play. So second half is going to be a lot of fun here in the baseball season. Remember, only one trade deadline, which is going to make things very interesting. July the 31st is when it's all said and done. No waiver deals this year in August like we're accustomed to having in the past. So teams are going to have a long, hard look in the mirror and decide, are we buyers, are we sellers? Should we wait this thing out a little bit more? Just complicates things as far as everything else is concerned. So we got through a show, no Kawhi, but we still had some fun here. Thanks to everybody involved. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. We'll talk to you again soon on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
It's the 4th of July sale at